My name is Ron Greenwald, and I am as you can see, I am a MBA, SCRES, a senior real estate specialist and broker associate. I've been in the space of working with seniors about 15 years now, and I'm very quickly going to turn this over to Amy, who's really the specialist in today's topic. And what I want to do is share at the end, after Amy, I will share some real world experiences that I've encountered over the last 15 years of personal experiences of dealing with my mom and dad and my wife's mom and dad, and then my real world experiences of being and working with seniors. What I will preface this all by is that this is really the start. Home care is the start of anyone's journey in terms of the aging process. We all think we're going to be great forever, and it's not really the way the journey happens for most of us, and Amy will address that. It's the acceptance of, really, to my world, is to be able to keep your independence. You got to accept some support to maintain your independence. It's not giving up independence, it's maintaining independence. So that's really what my takeaway hope from today is for me, as to having people understand that this is a journey and how to navigate that journey for your best health and well-being. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Ron. So this session is focused specifically on home care. And for anyone who missed our introductions in the first session, just to clarify, I currently work for the Grossmont Healthcare District as the Chief Community Health Officer. But my career until about a year ago was really focused on just what we're talking about here today. I have a joint Master of Social Work and Master of Public Health degree from San Diego State University. I started my career in medical case management, then moved into geriatric care management and home care. I ran a private care management and home care business for about 11 years. I left that business in 2015 and moved into the nonprofit world where I focus specifically on dementia education. But in that world, supporting people who are impacted by Alzheimer's disease and various types of dementia, questions about home care came up all the time, as well as questions about placement in various types of communal care settings, skilled nursing facilities, et cetera. So all of this has been my world really for 20 plus years. I also have personal experience. So I've individually been an advocate for families that are walking through this process of setting up home care, monitoring it, and supervising it. That's what a care manager does. But I've also, of course, been on the other end of that as a family caregiver myself, having both of my husband's parents within the last year passed away. Their caregiving journeys in the year or so prior to that involved all of these various levels of care. So I've lived it, I've worked it, and I hope that I can help to answer your questions about it. So today, again, is focused specifically on what we call non-medical in-home care, but do rest assured that there's opportunity in future sessions, or today, if you have questions and there's time, there's going to be opportunities in this series to talk about other types of care settings, things like adult day care, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing facilities, what I refer to as the continuum of care. So we're just sort of scratching the surface here. But home care is a great place to start. I know a lot of you who attended the first session had questions on this topic. So we did actually kind of rearrange things to jump right in on this topic. So I want to start by just clarifying what exactly we mean when we say in-home care. First, it's called by lots of different names. It's usually just called in-home care, but it is frequently mistaken with, confused with home health care. In-home care, home health care. They sound basically like exactly the same things, and they absolutely are not. In-home care is also referred to as custodial care or non-medical in-home care. So what you can sort of hear me describing there is that we're not talking about medical services. These are considered custodial services, meaning a person does not have to have a license or a particular certification in order to provide these services. You do want a professional, and I'll talk with you about how to find somebody with that training and those skills and the right supervision and background. But these are not skilled medical services. Custodial services are those that assist a person with what are called the ADLs, the activities of daily living. ADLs are something, if you're not familiar with that terminology, it'll probably come up a few times here during today and future programs in this series. The activities of daily living are, you can think of them as kind of, this is a bit crass, but you can think of them as the things you have to do kind of when you first get up in the morning, right? Going to the bathroom, brushing your teeth, taking your medications, feeding yourself, transferring. I mean, let's start with the very beginning. Transferring, meaning getting from a lying to seated or a seated to standing position. Mobility, being able to ambulate with or without assistance. All of those, I think that's showering, grooming. It's personal care. It's not medical care. And again, it's usually provided by non-licensed professionals. Home care is something that is flexible. It's driven by the care recipient or their representative. So that could be a family member, it could be a fiduciary, it could be a care manager, somebody who's got legal ability to contract on that person's behalf. So home care is not something that, for example, a doctor orders. Home health care services are. So if you or someone that you know have ever been in the hospital or been in a skilled nursing facility for recovery from an illness or an injury, and a physician ordered home health care services once you got home. This is not what we're talking about. Home health care services are delivered by licensed nurses or physical therapists, speech or occupational therapists, for example. These are licensed practitioners. Those services are ordered by a physician. They're covered by insurance, at least to a great extent. You as the recipient of those services, you don't get to choose really to too much extent when they come, how often they come, how many visits you get. That's all kind of determined by the doctor and the insurance that's covering it. Whereas non-medical home care is not driven by a doctor's order. No doctor's order is required. It is not covered by insurance, and we'll come back to that important concept in a moment, and it's driven by the client. If you want care a few hours a day, or if you want care 24 hours a day, it's up to you to decide what you need, what you want, and how you want those services delivered. Or again, somebody who has power of attorney or other decision-making authority can also contract for home care services on your behalf. So what I hope you're picking up is that home care is not care of a medical or invasive nature. There are limits to what a non-medical in-home care provider can do. They can't do things that sort of the easy way to think of it is breaching the bodily barrier. They can't give injections. And so that has important implications for people with sliding scale insulin dependence, for example, who require injections and can't manage those by themselves. Non-medical in-home care providers cannot provide this service. They're actually not allowed to administer medication. They can put the medication in one's hand or a cup or a dish and hand it to their client, remind them to do it, but they can't actually put it inside their body. Different companies have different levels of comfort, risk tolerance. There are some that will do things like this, to clean a catheter, for example, or help with medication assistance. So when I say that it's not allowed, I don't mean to say it doesn't happen. So just so you understand that's how that works. So it's care of a non-medical, non-invasive nature, this assistance with custodial tasks of daily living. And you can use home care services for a short period of time while you're recovering from something, or they can be used on an ongoing basis. Because you're paying out of pocket for these services, it's really up to you. So home care is not covered by Medicare. It is not covered by traditional health insurance. It is not covered by insurances like TRICARE, CalPERS. It is a out-of-pocket private pay type of assistance. However, one caveat to that, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about it unless anyone's got questions on it, is that if you are Medi-Cal eligible, if you are receiving Medi-Cal services and you are deemed eligible, there is a service called In-Home Supportive Services, IHSS, In-Home Supportive Services. This is only for Medi-Cal recipients. You have a case manager come out to the home and make a determination about how many hours per day or per month you are eligible for. And those services are actually covered by as a Medi-Cal benefit for people who qualify for that. But you don't have, if you are an IHSS recipient, you don't have the freedom of choice. You don't get to determine how many hours you get. Sometimes you can choose your own provider. Sometimes you're choosing from a list of county contracted providers. Sort of depends on your circumstances. Again, that's a program I'm happy to answer more questions about if anyone's got them. But for today, I'll keep us focused on the more traditional private pay in-home care services. And I will be talking about costs here in a moment. So when is it time to consider in-home care? This is probably the question I answered most often as a care manager. And again, as a dementia educator, we know that the need for more support is coming, or we have a feeling we might already be there. How will I know when it's time? My general answer is, if you're even asking yourself that question, it's probably time or very close to it. But some guidelines that you can use to try to answer those questions. So first, clearly, when assistance with activities of daily living, those ADLs, are needed because of any type of physical or cognitive impairment. And again, those could be temporary because of an illness, because of an injury while someone is recovering from something, or those physical or cognitive changes could be permanent due to a chronic condition. When we say assistance, what are we talking about? That can mean any number of things. It might just mean I need someone to verbally remind me to take my medicine, to take a shower, to talk me through the steps of my activities of daily living, because I live alone. I maybe have some cognitive impairment or some physical challenges, and I need reminders and or motivation to do those things. It might mean verbal prompts, right? Again, being kind of walked through how to do something, or it might mean physical assistance. And that can mean anything from someone just helping me set up the shower, helping me get undressed, making sure the temperature of the water is safe and comfortable for me, and then just sort of standing outside and being available to listen and see if I need some help. Or it might mean what we call total assistance, where the caregiver is providing hands-on care through the entire activity. So it can mean any number of things. It's certainly time to consider in-home care when a caregiver is strained, when they are losing sleep or otherwise experiencing negative health consequences as a result of their caregiving responsibilities. And this is a very real concern. Caregivers have incredibly poor health outcomes, very high rates of depression, very poor health compared to the general population. So when a caregiver is under strain, losing sleep, experiencing health problems, or is at any other type of risk, and I'm unfortunately, one of those risks is elder abuse. A lot of elder abuse occurs at the hands of well-meaning family caregivers who burned out, who reached their limit and sort of snapped, becoming emotionally abusive, physically abusive, or even neglect or abandonment can happen. So certainly we want to get in-home care, other types of support and services in place long before a person is anywhere near reaching that point. Again, it can be temporary. It can be a bridge. It can be part of a patchwork of care that is provided. Maybe some unpaid friends, family, neighbors, church members come over and provide assistance a few days a week. The person goes to a day program 1 or 2 days a week, and then there's professional in-home care, maybe just overnight so that a caregiver can sleep, or a couple of days a week to give a primary caregiver a rest. So that's what I mean when I say a bridge, or home care can be a permanent solution. So used alone or in conjunction with other supports and services. Home care is costly, and I don't just mean financially. It is a very expensive endeavor, and ultimately 24-hour home care costs far more than care that is provided in any other type of residential setting, assisted living, memory care, or a skilled nursing facility. Even if you're paying out of pocket for it, home care around the clock is incredibly costly. In San Diego, I think the current hourly rate averages somewhere around $35 per hour. Very, very expensive. And we used to, until a few years ago, we used to have an exemption in the field of home care. As employers, home care companies could have a caregiver sort of off the clock overnight during a person's rest period, during the client's rest period, I mean to say, so that the caregiver wasn't actually paid during the hours that the client was sleeping. But that is no longer the case. We no longer have a sleep time exemption. And so you are, if you're working with a reputable agency, you need to plan ahead for having somebody awake and on duty around the clock, 24 hours a day at $35 an hour. I can't do that math, but it's a very high number. And again, it's much more than the cost of residential care. But for a lot of people, being at home is what they value most. And it is an absolutely workable proposition. Again, especially if you can kind of combine services. A lot of families will pool resources, or again, bring together unpaid and paid services to make that a workable option. If it is the case that somebody just really, really values being in their own home. But this requires a lot of people, not only money, but a lot of time, a lot of energy. This is why sort of my entire profession, the profession of care management and my career for many years existed. Care managers, for a lot of people, are that critical connection between the home care provider and the client or the family, because it takes even if you're working with an agency, it takes a lot of time to find the right people, to help somebody sort of get settled into the routines of a household, to help a client get settled into the new patterns and routines with a new person in their home and in their space. So this takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and can be especially challenging for a long distance caregiver. Let's see. Okay. So how does this all work? First, I'll just say agencies all operate differently. So it's long-term care. This is one aspect, one component of our long-term care system, non-medical in-home care. And long-term care doesn't have kind of a one size, one process fits all kind of a model. Every agency is a little bit differently. So it is really important as a consumer to ask questions and really understand how they operate. There are a few sort of consistent guidelines now that all licensed home care organizations have to follow. The employees have to be their employees. They can't be licensed as a home care organization, an HCO, by California's Home Care Bureau if they employ independent contractors, for example. So they have to be full employees of the agency. A certain level of background checking is required. It's not extensive. A lot of agencies go far above and beyond what is required of them for the consumer's protection, for their own protection as well, in terms of doing criminal background checks, DMV checks. Some of them do credit and financial checks. Some of them do drug screening. Most of that is not actually required. The requirements are pretty minimal with regard to criminal background checking. So you want to ask questions, understand the agency, understand their process, not just how they background check people, but where do they find their caregiver employees? What are they looking for in an employee? How do they screen them? How do they train them? I think that's a really important component of a quality in-home care provider that often goes overlooked. What's their onboarding process look like? That's important, but also what kind of ongoing training and support, continued professional education do their employees receive in order to help them be prepared for challenging care situations? Being a caregiver is incredibly difficult work physically, but also just sort of mentally and emotionally. They work in extremely difficult circumstances alone, on a one-on-one, usually with one client. So there can be a lot of kind of isolation. Their jobs are physically demanding. And then of course, the person's needs are constantly changing. And keep in mind, most of the time they're working with a client who doesn't particularly want them there, no matter how good they are, no matter how nice their relationship might be. None of us really wants a caregiver in our home and in our bathrooms and in our space with us. So it's really important when you're interviewing home care companies to ask them how they support their employees, because this will really help you understand, is there going to be a lot of turnover, or nobody can guarantee, of course, that you'll have the same consistent employee on an ongoing basis. They're free employed at will employees like anyone else in California. But certainly an agency that's investing in a good onboarding, training, and support for their employees, you're going to have lower turnover. So ask those questions. Don't be afraid to dig in and find out what you want to know. Ask to see their service agreement up front before you get too far along in the process. Just ask them to see a blank one. They don't have to fill in any of the client information or any of the costs, because they usually won't do that until they've come out and done an assessment, and they can sort of estimate for you, okay, based on the home environment, based on the client and their particular ADL needs, their activities of daily living, how intense the work is, but also what time of day the shifts are, right? If you're only looking for care on Friday nights from 7 to 11 p.m., you're probably going to have to pay more, because the agency has to pay more in order to in order to staff a shift like that. So once they've come out, they've done an assessment or a consultation, they use different words. They can generally fill out a service contract for you, a plan of care, allow you to look at that and agree to that service agreement. But you can also just look to see, may I just have a look at your services agreement, so that you can see What do they do after hours? What's their 24/7 sort of emergency protocol? What if it's a day that you don't usually have a caregiver scheduled, but you have a sudden need? From a distance, you learn that someone that you care for has gone into the hospital or has come down ill, and they need some more assistance and they need it right away. What's their process for after hours or short notice staffing or restaffing? This is a really important reason to work with an agency rather than hiring private employees yourself. If a caregiver gets sick, if their car breaks down, if they're injured on the job, if they go on vacation, sometimes they need a break too. This becomes your responsibility if you are the employer. Whereas if they are fully employed by the agency, it's their job to restaff that. Ask questions. How will that work? Will I have a chance to meet that person before they go out? Right? That isn't always, depending on the nature of the restaffing, that might not be possible. But ask about their policies for how they do that. How long of notice do we need to give to cancel a shift, for example? Ask questions about their meal periods. Those are mandated by labor laws, but they're very, very tricky. And they're also very dependent upon the particular circumstances of your shifts. If you have somebody there, 4 to 6 hours at a time versus you have staff there on a 24-hour basis, those meal periods, rest times, break periods, those are all going to look pretty different. Our labor laws in California in this area are incredibly complex, and it's very, very easy to violate them on accident. So another reason you don't want to be sort of in the business of employing your own caregivers, if at all possible, leave that to the agency. So how do you find a good one? This is really, really tricky. So we in San Diego County, Ron, maybe I think we've got something like 150 different licensed home care organizations operating in San Diego County. Before the Home Care Services Bureau was created and home care organizations had to be licensed, when I started in this field of work, there were like 600-700 different home care agencies. But several years ago, I think 7-8 years ago, licensure came on the scene here in California. And I think we're in the neighborhood of 150 or so now. Something like that. It's a lot. How do you choose a good one? Just the fact that they have a home care organization license and the fact that they have a clean record, what does that tell you? Unfortunately, very little, because licensure just hasn't been around for very long yet. They haven't had a lot of opportunities to be inspected, to have those reports written about them just yet. Licensure is fairly new. So you do want them to have that license. And you do want them to have a pretty clear record. Doesn't mean they can't have any violations, but you want to be able to have those violations been cleared. But I just want to caution you that seeing those clean reviews, that the state of that licensure and no violations doesn't necessarily mean that it's sort of A+ perfect agency. The system just hasn't been around for very long. So talk to your advisors, talk to the Ron Greenwalds of the world, talk to your friends, talk to your attorneys, your CPA, your accountant, your neighbors, your pastor, the people you trust most. Talk to them about who they've used, who they've had good experiences with, who to steer clear of. There's a lot of important intelligence you can gather that way. People do this in different ways. People put posts up on social media. Please steer clear of Craigslist. I hope it goes without saying, but this is not a good way to find a non-medical in-home care provider. But people and people you trust, ask them who they've used. Your neighbors, right? Because that way you're going to find somebody who works in that particular neighborhood. So seek those recommendations from trusted advisors. Use caution when you are consulting an online directory or a referral agency. And I don't mean that they are all predatory or that that you shouldn't take advice that you receive from one of these services. Just do so in an informed way. Most of the online directories that you will find, they're advertiser driven, of course, right? Somebody's paying to keep that site up and to keep it updated. And there's good information to be had there. Just know that the agencies that pop up first in your search are going to be the ones that paid the most to pop up in your search. So just be aware of that, be an informed consumer. And referral agencies. There are a lot of referral agencies here in San Diego County. They used to just really focus on placement in care communities, helping people find assisted living, for example, or small board and care homes. But more and more of them have expanded. And now they help people find a whole host of different types of services. And this is a really good thing. It's free for you as a consumer. You just want to know that because they're not getting paid by you, they're getting paid by the agencies that they refer to. So you want to know that up front, ask about their process, and make sure that you know they're doing their due diligence and really vetting the agencies that they're referring you to. So just enter into that in an informed kind of a way. Proceed with caution. The Home Care Services Bureau, this is the state entity that I've been referring to. So home care organizations and private for-hire in-home caregivers who work independently, they have to be licensed by the Home Care Services Bureau, which is part of California's Community Care Licensing Division. So you can Google that and find your way to the Home Care Services Bureau. And again, this is where you can look up an agency and see the state of their license and any history of violations or inspections that might results of any inspections that might be there. Shop around, find the right personal fit, right? Home care companies come in a variety of shapes and sizes. There are very, very large national, in fact, international franchises with multiple offices here in San Diego County. They're all operated by a different franchise owner. So interview the agency that's in your area. There are also very small, there used to be lots of kind of mom and pop home care providers. We don't see so much of that anymore because it's a very expensive business, but there are still a lot of very small, more kind of boutique model home care companies where it's, maybe an owner or two and a small staff. This can also be a really good fit for a lot of people. You just sort of want to figure out what you're looking for and what feels good and what meets your needs. Just remembering, though, that your needs are likely to change. This is, in my mind, the most important thing to remember about home care is that a person's need for assistance with activities of daily living is going to change over time. They're going to have good days. They're going to have bad days. Over time, we can expect for most people to experience a decline. Sometimes it's long, slow, steady decline. Sometimes it's a very sharp decline in the event of a stroke or, another sort of catastrophic medical a fall that results in a broken hip, for example, or a head injury. But that is to say, no matter who we are, what our particular circumstances are, our needs are going to change over time. And so I think what I would see a lot of people do is just sort of, they had their longtime housekeeper who had really become a very close friend over the years. And that person just sort of started taking on more and more caregiving responsibilities as the years have gone by, starting to do a little more shopping, now doing some meal prep, now, helping out in the bath, sort of taking on more and more responsibility. That's only going to work up to a point. And it's really important to know that those folks, in terms of your renter's insurance, your homeowner's insurance, they're not insured to be providing personal care services, right? So there's a reason that these agencies exist. They have the right insurances, they understand the risks, and they have the kind of financial capacity to absorb those risks. So keeping the same person in place for years and years is just not going to be safe. It's not going to be reasonable for most of us if we're realistic about this. You want to have home care services in place that are going to be able to flex and move along with you as things change.
Amy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just, before I chat, I had 2 questions. Long-term care insurance, you want to address that real
Sure.
quickly before I start?
Yes, as a source of payment for home care services.
right.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So when I was talking about the financial resources required to pay for in-home care, yes, I mentioned, I hopefully pretty clear, health insurance, Medicare does not cover this, but private long-term care insurance often will. If you have long-term care insurance, please get out a copy of your benefit statement right now, long before you need it. Dig it out, because I
Hear us
know.
first, and then they can do it.
What's that?
After they listen to Ron.
Oh, sure. I don't mean like right now, but as soon as this session ends. Yeah.
Okay.
Go dig it out. I think we all have those, piles of old paperwork buried around our houses. I certainly do. Go find, if you've got a long-term care insurance policy, thanks, Ron, for bringing this up. A lot of people don't even remember that they have it, or they're kind of too intimidated to take it out and figure out how it works. Or they assume that it's for care in a community, right? It's for skilled nursing care or assisted living care. And that may very well be the case, but go have a look at the benefit statement and see what it says. Policies that were written in the last 20 years or so will almost always include a benefit for non-medical in-home care. Older policies that were written more than 20 years ago may or may not include home care, but a lot of them have this provision in it. What was it called? An emerging technologies clause, meaning this is so cool. So the foresight of the people that drafted these policies, basically to say if some new service exists by the time you use this policy that we don't know to include right now, those services may be covered too. My grandmother had one of these policies. When her policy was written a billion years ago, assisted living was not a term. It was not a thing. But by the time we opened her claim, it was, and it covered it because her insurance provider couldn't have predicted that such a thing would exist. Look to see whether or not there's a home care benefit. Look to see what the what is that? I'm drawing a blank on the period of time.
Yeah, like my personal policy will go for 3 years. So
I meant the 30, 60, 90-day period that you have to pay out of pocket. Sorry, it'll come to me in the middle of Ron's presentation.
The phase in or something.
Yeah, there's a period of time, 30, 60, 90 days, wherein you usually have to pay out of pocket before your policy is going to kick in. But what I see a lot of people do is they're kind of hanging on to that long-term care insurance policy for the rainy day. They think, oh, this is going to get more expensive. I'll open this claim when things are getting more expensive. Don't do that, because so many policies go unused. They're so expensive. If you've been paying these premiums for a lot of years, get that claim open and start using it right away. And there was another question, Ron.
My other question was just to differentiate home care agencies, those that focus in on dementia or Alzheimer's versus physical.
Yes, I will come to that. I just thought of the word. It's called an elimination period. So, okay. So yes, that's another great question. When you are when you're interviewing in-home care providers, some of the questions you might ask are, what specific training they've got for clients who are living with dementia. I think most large home care agencies these days, the bulk of their clientele are affected by cognitive impairment or dementia in one way or another. most people that require in-home care services have some type of cognitive impairment. It could just be very mild memory loss. It could be very late stage dementia. Most large home care agencies do offer specialized training and support for caregivers that are working with people with dementia, but don't assume that. Ask those questions and ask about what type of training they have, as well as are they comfortable? Are they familiar with working with people who are at the end of their life? Hospice services are fantastic. I can't say enough about hospice, but it's not 24/7 wrap around all the time. So often, if a person is on hospice, you're going to have non-medical in-home care as well as the hospice team involved. So ask about their skill level, their training, and their comfort with working with people at the end of their life as well. Did that cover it? I wasn't. Okay, great.
So I'm going to have some real world stories that I've encountered as to end up the presentation. And the spouse is a caregiver. My dad and stepmom had a 50-year second marriage. I mean, a very successful second marriage. And towards the last 3 years of his life, she became his full-time caregiver. And the dynamics of that relationship changed so dramatically to one of a incredible 50-year love affair marriage to the last 6 months of his life. They were both screaming for a divorce. I cannot emphasize enough of the, as Amy so pointed out, of a burnout of a caregiver and the pride of my dad not wanting his wife to bathe him, to change his the whole thing was just very hard to watch. And again, as someone who says, your son is a expert in this arena field, I can help you. The dynamics of my relationship with my dad and my stepmom changed dramatically in the sense of I wasn't the child, I was trying to be the parent, and they resented me terribly for that aspect of it. So the whole scenario was not good. And here I'm the one who preaches all of this, and I couldn't do it for my own stepmom and my own dad. So I can't emphasize enough, don't try to be the hero. Yes, you took a vow. Yes, I understand all that. But you want to spend, if you are going to be in the position of a caregiver, you want to be in a position where you are providing love and attention and smiling and enjoying the good times. Let someone else do the hard work, I guess, or the labor of it, so that you can enjoy those positive moments with your loved one. It was really hard to watch. And my dad passed away several years ago. And to this day, she still has guilt about the whole way it went down. And it's just really hard. And she went into depression. She was on a lot of medication for antidepressant drugs. So that's my spouse is the caregiver. I'll go to the next slide. The family member as a caregiver. For those that may know or don't know, I do a podcast called The Ron Greenwald Show. You can get it on all the different platforms, but we had an interview. I did a podcast with a lady named Suzanne Foreman. She was gracious enough to come onto the podcast and tell her story. Suzanne Foreman is the daughter of her parents, and she came in, and she, in her 50s, decided or volunteered or coerced by her two brothers to move into her parents' home and become a full-time caregiver. And again, if there is a son or daughter that's going to come in and move in with you to be the full-time caregiver, again, the family dynamics changes dramatically. And her situation was, there was no, and I call it a prenup. If you are bringing someone into your home, or you are going to go move in with mom and dad and be the caregiver, You have to have an agreement as to how this is all going to work. Are you going to get paid? Are you going to get more of the inheritance? Are you going to be able to live in the house after the older adult passes away? What is this all going to happen? Because your siblings are not just going to be, your siblings are going to want to have action. They want, if the mom and dad pass away and the home has to be sold, and the trust says it's a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split because there's 3 siblings, but you gave up 10 years of your life to be a caregiver, what are you entitled to? Or are you entitled to anything because your brother says, well, you live with mom and dad for free? So I've seen it, heard it, I've been in these homes where there's just a lot of anxiety and angst over that issue. So think about having a prenup if you're going to have a family member, a grandchild, a niece, nephew come in and live with you, because the postnup is usually litigation. So word to the wise is just think of it as a job, and how are we going to handle it, and what benefits does everybody get from it? So next slide. The non-licensed caregiver. Amy said it, I think you heard it several times, labor laws, labor laws, labor laws. If you just bring someone in off, a friend refers you somebody and you bring that person into your home, you are opening yourself up not just to the incredible labor laws of the state of California and all that comes with it, you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit that you cannot defend. I was at a presentation last night, a lawyer presentation, and the lawyer, her first stat on the screen was 95% of all the world's lawsuits. Let me repeat that. 95% of all the world's lawsuits are in the United States. 95%. So if you don't, and I say, if you don't think there are lawyers just sitting around your home going, you brought someone in off the street to be a caregiver, you're mistaken. It could even be collusion. And you just have to be very careful about that. The subject of elder abuse, I want to bring that up. If you are estranged from a loved one, please think about calling that person and just making sure they may be all right. We had a situation where the parents divorced, dad was estranged from the family. He moved into a condominium in Pacific Beach. His cognitive decline started, and none of the family members knew about it at the beginning at all. Somehow, some way, he has a caregiver come in off this, he hires a caregiver. I don't know how exactly how that happened, but that caregiver then got in collusion with a bank teller. And this was a civil and criminal suit that happened in San Diego. So I always paint those, I know people go, Ron, you're always painting this picture of all these things that can happen. Well, I've seen them. I've been part of them. I have experienced them because I've become involved with after the fact, when the only asset left is the real estate, and they have to sell the real estate to be able to provide support for the loved one. So the non-licensed referral, I can't really advocate that in any way, shape, or form. Yes, you may be saving some money, but you're opening yourself up to not just the labor laws of the state of California, but you're also setting yourself up to lawsuits if that person falls in your home. So those are some of my personal experiences of doing what I've done over the years. There are probably 100 caregiving agencies in San Diego County. I can only emphasize what Amy has said over and over again. Ask them tons of questions. I think the last slide is the home care scenarios. Ask them lots of questions and expectations. Have a clear understanding of what to expect. In today's labor shortage, to expect that you're going to get the same person every time is not realistic. And that when somebody has cognitive decline and not having that same caregiver every time can set that person off. But what is the alternative? So you just have to have a clear expectations back and forth. What can you assure me? And they're probably going to say, we can't really assure you of anything. The other question is minimum, and Amy can maybe address that, is minimum times. A lot of them will want a minimum of 4 hours. The caregiver is driving 30 or 40 miles, their gas and things like that. They will not come for a 2-hour stint situation. Amy, can you address that a little bit?
Sure. Those are actually two really important points there. I think we're all very aware of the shortage of healthcare workers that we're experiencing in the United States right now. It's even more profound when it comes to these non-medical in-home care workers. The shortage is real. It's been coming for a long time, but the pandemic really sped that up, and we're really in a bit of a crisis at this point. So do be aware that a lot of agencies where they used to be able to just sort of staff immediately, it's taking them longer to ramp up. And there is more required of them in order to restaff when somebody is sick or out. So just sort of be aware of that. And again, maybe just asking those questions up front. And yeah, one of those items you want to be looking for in that service agreement when you are interviewing a company that you're considering hiring is, what are their staffing minimums, their shift minimums. So most agencies have a shift minimum, nearly every agency. Some of them have been as small as about 2 hours, but that's very, very rare. They'll do, and the hourly rate for a 2-hour visit, sometimes they refer to these as bath visits, because it's really just sort of the time it takes to have somebody come and help with a task like a bath. The hourly rate is much higher because, of course, these are professionals and this is their living. And so the agency has to pay that caregiver more to come out and just work for 2 hours. Most agencies, though, have at least a 4-hour shift minimum these days. And many agencies also have a weekly minimum. You'll frequently see that an agency, for example, will require 4 hours at a time and 12 hours per week, for example. They're all different. Not everybody does this, but it's good to know that that's a reasonable thing. And most agencies do that not for their own benefit. It's actually for yours and for their employees. You will have less turnover. They'll have a more consistent workforce, and you'll have more consistent faces showing up in the house if somebody can agree to some of those basic minimums.
And then I see Nancy, so I want to turn it back over to Nancy, but I will finish up by saying, obviously, like Amy said, we don't want someone, 90% of the time, we don't want somebody coming into our home and upsetting our day-to-day routine. So if you are the one who feels the need to have a caregiver and your partner or spouse is really resisting, take the baby steps. Maybe get someone in there once a week for 4 hours. And again, if that person who needs the caregiving is starting to bond with the caregiver to some degree, then you take the next baby step. Maybe you really want that second day. And that relationship starts to build so that it really helps everybody. But if you think you can just open up your house for 20 to 30 hours and your partner or spouse is going to go, great, that's generally not the way it happens, because there's a pride factor. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And I'll finish off. I will just go back to my dad. They had a 2-story house, and his 90-pound soaking wet wife was trying to get a dead weight, because my dad's brain was totally functional, but his body parts did not. So she was trying to go up and down stairs with a gentleman who couldn't walk. It was heartbreaking. So that's a bit negative, and I don't want to end it there. But so I just ask you to think about it, take Amy's advice, pull out the dust on your long-term health care, see what it has to say, and take the baby steps of because again, if you want to age in place, you want to stay in your home, you want to do it successfully. That's the journey of this whole big umbrella, is how to age in place and how to take this journey so that you can stay at home as long as possible. Home care is one of those avenues. So Nancy, I'll turn it back to you.
If I can just pop in real quick, just with another thought on that. It's a really good point, Ron, and sorry, Nancy, just on the topic of taking those baby steps, something I like to encourage people to do is to kind of practice being a recipient of care before you need it. So some ways you can do that is, thinking ahead, for example, about a time that you might not be able to drive. Start practicing having someone else do the driving. If you're the person in your household that always drives, right? Practice having your spouse or a child or a partner or a friend do the driving, just so you can kind of get used to the experience of being driven around. It'll be easier to ease into that someday down the road. And you can do this with in-home care as well. When my father-in-law was in need of in-home care assistance, absolutely did not want the help. His situation changed rapidly because of a brain injury, and he suddenly needed help he'd never needed before. It was overnight, and he absolutely hated it. His first couple of nights having a caregiver, all that happened was the caregiver sort of hung close to him, and they sat together and watched a baseball game. A very expensive companion for watching a baseball game, I will give you that. But those couple of hours of just bonding with that person, and did that person remain his caregiver for, the rest of his life? No, but he got used to having someone that was not his wife in the house with him, in his space. Oh, could you go get me a glass of water? Getting more comfortable with asking for that help. So there are ways you can ease into a caregiving situation. When I was working at Alzheimer's San Diego, we had a respite companionship program. They didn't provide these, they were volunteers that were screened and trained and matched with a family. They didn't provide hands-on assistance. They were strictly companions. This was a wonderful entree into getting used to having new homes, new people in your home, new faces. And just, it was also great for the caregivers to see, oh, he or she does much better with a new person than I thought they would, right? This was easier than I thought. There was often a silver lining to that as well. So there are definitely ways to take those baby steps, and, professionals can help you kind of piece that together if you need it. Nancy, you're muted.
You're muted, Nancy.
Are we ready? This is Michelle. Are we ready to stop the recording and open it up for a Q&A? Okay, I'll stop.